The safe house was meant to be secure, and the extraction point supposed to be clear. The six-person Navy SEAL element expected roughly 48 hours before hostile forces could find them in a remote mountain region. Instead, about 60 armed militants converged from 3 directions with less than 20 minutes warning. The odds were 10-1 against them, the situation deteriorating by the second, and the unit's lone sniper, Clara Hayes, faced a single option. Start picking off threats faster than the enemy could organize an assault, or watch her teammates be cut down within 30 minutes. Some snipers count rounds. Others count how many lives they save. This is the story of one woman, one rifle, and the 47 enemy fighters who learned numbers don't matter when you're someone who never misses. Clara Hayes was 29 and had 6 years as a Navy SEAL sniper when everything went wrong in the Kandora Valley of Arakistan. The valley itself was legendary. The same terrain where past fighters held mountain passes, peaks rising like walls, and every village could be a fortress. It was beautiful, deadly, and right now packed with people who wanted her team dead. The mission had sounded simple 3 days earlier during the briefing at Fort Meridian Base. Infiltrate a remote vale near the border, gather intel on a suspected terrorist training camp, then extract before enemy forces could respond. 6 operators, 72 hours, in and out with nobody the wiser. The team was small but capable. Lieutenant Commander Adam Voss led the element. 10 years in the SEALs, 2 deployments with DevGru. The kind of leader who'd seen everything and survived it all. Chief Petty Officer Owen Redd handled breaching and close-quarters fighting. Petty Officer First Class Dylan Park ran the communications. Petty Officer Second Class Luke Moreno handled navigation and point through brutal mountain terrain. Petty Officer Second Class Riley Shaw was medic and secondary assault operator. And Clara was their sniper, the one who saw threats before they became problems, who eliminated targets at distances the others couldn't engage, who provided overwatch that kept the team alive when everything else went to hell. Which is exactly what had just happened. They had inserted via helicopter 3 nights ago, landing in a valley about 15 kilometers from their target. The insertion had gone perfectly. No contact, no compromise. Moving through terrain so rugged most enemy forces avoided it altogether. They had established a hide site in an abandoned shepherd's compound, built into the mountainside. A structure that gave them clear sight lines out to the surrounding area while remaining concealed from casual observation. The intelligence gathering had gone well. They had identified the training facility, documented the personnel, recorded communications, and gathered enough evidence to justify a larger operation. Mission success with 48 hours remaining, before extraction. Then their communications specialist, Park, intercepted enemy radio traffic that made everyone's blood run cold. "They know we're here," came his voice, tight as he monitored the encrypted receiver. "I'm picking up multiple units diverted to this valley. They're organizing a search operation." Someone had compromised their position. Voss immediately ordered the team to bug out toward the backup extraction point 8 kilometers northeast. But before they could even pack their equipment, Red, on watch at the compound's elevated position, made the radio call that confirmed their worst fears. "Contact. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Estimate 20-plus military-age males armed with AKs and PKMs. They're heading directly toward our position." The team moved into defensive positions immediately, but the situation deteriorated with terrifying speed. More enemy forces appeared from the west, then from the north. Within 10 minutes, they were facing an estimated 60 hostile combatants, closing in from 3 directions, with more likely coming from the 4th direction, east, where the terrain was most difficult, but also where their only real escape route lay. Voss made the tactical calculation quickly. We can't outrun them carrying all our equipment. We make a stand here, hold them off long enough for air support to arrive. Park, get me KS on station ASAP, close air support, aircraft that can strike enemy positions and give us breathing room. Park's reply was the final piece of bad news. CAS is a minimum of 40 minutes out. The nearest Apache helicopters are tied up on another operation, so we're on our own until they can disengage. 40 minutes against 60-plus militants organizing an assault on a position they somehow already know we're holding. The abandoned compound was defensible but far from perfect. Stone walls would stop small arms rounds, but they limited movement and created a fixed target that could be flanked. The elevated watch, where Red had been posted, offered excellent observation, but exposed whoever occupied it to fire from several directions. The main structure had only a few entry points, which helped defense but made a withdrawal under fire hazardous. Clara moved immediately to the high position and set up her rifle. An Mk13 Mod 7 in .300 Winchester Magnum with a Schmidt and Bender scope, covering the likeliest approach routes. From that perch, she could see roughly 270 degrees of terrain, with engagement ranges from about 200 meters out to over 800 depending on direction. The rest of the element had fortified the compound itself, arranging to cover gaps outside Clara's arcs and to stop any assault that got through her lines. They had ammo for a prolonged fight, but not forever. A handful of fragmentation grenades and one claymore were all they had in the way of force multipliers. Radio contact with higher command existed, but no way to speed support. What they did have was Clara Hayes, a sniper with 120 rounds of match-grade ammo and 6 years of experience killing targets under the worst conditions. Tango units organizing at the tree line, 600 meters south, Clara reported calmly over the team net. Estimate 25 fighters. Looks like they're preparing an assault by fire and maneuver. Second group of 20 at the ridgeline, 400 meters west. Third group approaching from the north. Can't get a solid count yet, but estimate another 15 to 20, Voss acknowledged. Weapons free on any hostile that presents a threat. Make your shots count. We need to break their will to assault before they commit to a full push. Clara's vantage gave her an elevated view of the battlefield forming around them. The southern group was the largest and most organized, dismounting from vehicles and preparing a coordinated attack with base of fire and maneuver elements. The western group moved through tougher ground but was closing, and the northern element, though more distant, advanced steadily. Engaging southern group, Clara transmitted, starting with leadership elements. Through her scope, the world contracted to magnified detail. At 600 meters, the fighters were clear. Men in mixed military and civilian dress carrying AK-47s and PKMs, some with RPGs slung across their backs. She watched them organize, leaders gesturing and positioning fighters for the assault, and her breathing slowed to the rhythm drilled into her by thousands of training hours and real combat. Outside the scope, everything faded to background noise. This was the zone of great snipers. No rush, no panic. A smooth mechanical execution of practiced skill. The man directing the southern group gestured toward fighters on his left, setting up a flank. He stood partially behind a tree, but enough of his torso showed for a shot. Clara adjusted for 600 meters, accounted for the light left-to-right wind and the slight uphill angle, and settled the crosshairs on center mass. She exhaled half a breath, held it, and increased trigger pressure smoothly. The rifle recoiled into her shoulder. Through her scope, Clara saw the hit. The man folded instantly, and the fighters around him scattered, hunting for a phantom shooter they couldn't see or hear from 600 meters with a suppressed rifle. "Target down," she reported calmly, already sliding onto the next aim point, and a PKM gunner who was settling into a firing position behind a rock, completely focused on his task and blind to being watched, was her next acquisition. Her second shot dropped him before he could bring the weapon to bear, and the southern element began to react to sniper fire without ever pinpointing her position, ducking for cover, shouting, and looking in the wrong directions as their command and control frayed. Clara shifted focus to the Western group. At 400 meters through rougher ground, they presented tougher engagements, but were advancing more aggressively, likely assuming they were outside effective range. One fighter bounded forward from cover to cover, trying to close the distance. Clara tracked his motion, anticipated where he'd stop, and fired as he dove behind a boulder. The round struck him mid-movement, and he went down hard. "Western group, 350 meters and closing," she called, engaging again. And the next man she took had an RPG slung across his back as he knelt to prepare a shot. An immediate, rushed 2-second acquisition by sniper standards, but a necessary, deadly interruption because RPGs against the stone walls would have been catastrophic. That shooter collapsed, and the Western group, having identified her approximate sector, began returning ineffective fire. At 350 meters with AKs against an elevated position, their shots cracked overhead or thudded into the stone below, none finding flesh. Clara ignored the incoming rounds. Fear wrecked precision, and panic cost lives, and moved methodically through targets. A man providing covering fire, an officer gesturing orders, another with an RPG. "Western group breaking contact," Red reported from the compound. "They're pulling back to cover." "You've got them spooked," Voss added, noting the shift. But the northern element was still advancing at roughly 350 meters, and apparently unaware the others had been engaged. So Clara swung her aim northward. That force crept more cautiously through concealment, funneling through a ravine that limited her sight lines and offered intermittent exposures. She waited, patient, watching for clear windows. When a fighter crossed an open stretch, she took the shot, and he dropped. Another man who thought himself hidden was revealed by her elevated perspective and went down as well. The northern group realized they were under effective fire and went to ground, halting in positions about 250 meters out. They were no longer closing, but not withdrawing either, transformed into a fixed problem she had to suppress. "South group reorganizing," Park called, and Clara swept her scope back. The initial southern element had been reinforced, more fighters and possibly vehicles arriving to bolster the assault. From her vantage, she could now make out roughly 30 to 40 fighters at the tree line, with more arriving in pickup trucks, hunkered down in cover after learning that exposure meant getting picked off. One technical with a heavy machine gun in the bed moved into position to provide fire support for another assault. The technical posed a major threat, capable of suppressing the compound with sustained fire, and at 650 meters taking out the gunner would help, but only temporarily, since someone else could quickly man the weapon. Clara chose to disable the vehicle itself, shifting her aim from the gunner to the engine block, because a 300 Winchester Magnum round might not obliterate the motor, but could damage it enough to put the truck out of action. She sent 3 rounds in rapid succession into the engine compartment, and watched the technical's hood begin to billow smoke. The vehicle was effectively neutralized, but the lesson was obvious. Fighters kept lower, moved more carefully, and stopped presenting easy targets. The southern group started preparing what looked like a coordinated assault with a base of fire to suppress the compound, while maneuver elements advanced from multiple directions. "Contact west," Moreno called. "They're trying to flank our position. Estimate 10 fighters moving through your blind spot. Clara couldn't cover every angle at once. The western flanking element moved through ground she couldn't observe from her perch, so the team had to handle that threat with direct fire. She heard the distinctive crack of M4s as her teammates engaged, mixed with AK return fire. The metallic thunk of grenades and the close-quarters fighting she couldn't influence from her sniper position. Western flankers repelled, Voss reported. 2 enemies down, the rest withdrew, but they'd try again. Then Clara watched roughly 25 fighters begin bounding forward from cover to cover in the south, using terrain and vegetation to mask their movements. They executed a competent infantry assault, suppressing with machine guns while riflemen surged in short rushes, and Clara increased her tempo, leading a man running between boulders and dropping him mid-stride. She waited for a fighter providing covering fire to expose himself behind a tree, removed him, and prioritized a leader directing the assault despite a difficult angle. Her cadence rose to 1 shot every 4 to 6 seconds, fast for a precision shooter, but necessary given the tactical reality. Every shot required acquisition, range estimation, wind correction, and flawless trigger control, and each resulted in either a hit or a near miss that forced fighters to seek better cover. The southern assault stalled after advancing only some 50 meters before casualties drove them to ground. The pause was temporary. Clara saw them reorganize and bring up reinforcements, likely planning to mass enough force to overwhelm the position regardless of losses. Northern group advancing again, Red warned, moving through the ravine for concealment. Clara shifted northward because the ravine funneled attackers into a predictable route and could bring them within 200 meters before they exposed themselves for a final rush. "I've got the ravine exit covered," Clara transmitted. "If they come out, I can engage." Park's voice carried frustration when he reported support was still 20 minutes away. "They're pushing as fast as they can, but support's a long way off, 20 more minutes, while the enemy grows larger and better organized by the minute." So far, the team had held the perimeter through Clara Hayes' long-range fire and the compound's direct suppression, but ammo was finite, and the adversary seemed to have limitless reinforcements. Fighters began pouring out of the ravine in 3s and 4s, rushing the compound to overwhelm Clara's ability to engage them all, and she methodically worked each wave, first man down, second down, third seeking cover, fourth diving back into the ravine, only to watch the next group try the same thing with the same result: casualties and retreat. "They're testing us," Voss observed over the net, trying to figure out capabilities and fix positions, and he was right. The enemy commander was probing with minimal forces to gather intel while he conserved his main strength for a coordinated push once he understood the defense. "South, west, and north are being reinforced," Clara reported through her scope as more vehicles rolled into distant positions. "I'm estimating 70-plus fighters now, maybe more I can't see." The ammunition picture was worsening. Clara had begun with 120 rounds and had fired about 35, roughly 30 confirmed hits, and 5 near misses that still achieved suppression, leaving 85 rounds for whatever came next. Sunset was complicating matters. The scope had an illuminated reticle for low-light shooting, but target ID would only get harder as darkness fell, and the enemy likely planned to strike once muzzle flashes became harder to spot. "Enemy commander probably waiting for dark," Clara transmitted, and Voss replied, "We need to make the next 20 minutes count." When Cass arrived, they'd need targets marked for immediate strikes. The wait was brutal, so Clara kept overwatching as enemy positions consolidated. Machine guns were being emplaced, assault elements were forming, and leaders moved between positions coordinating the attack. She picked off targets of opportunity whenever they exposed themselves. A man lingering too long, a machine gun team setting up in range, leaders foolish enough to stand and observe. Each shot burned ammo but slowed the enemy's preparation, and every casualty removed a fighter from the order of battle while every leader downed disrupted their coordination. 10 minutes to Cass. Light fell fast as the sun slid behind the western ridgelines, so Clara switched to the faint red illumination of her reticle. "Movement south," she called as forces shifted into final assault positions. "Movement north," Red added, as multiple fighters exited the ravine and began forming at the exit. "And movement west," Moreno reported, a larger flanking element assembling. Three-direction coordination now underway, and likely with everything they had left to try to overrun the compound before air support could intervene. "All positions, weapons free, engage at will," Voss ordered. "Clara, prioritize whatever threatens to break through. Everyone else, cover your assigned sectors." "Fight smart and make every round count," Voss ordered, and the southern assault struck first, about 25 fighters advancing under heavy machine gun fire from the tree line, and Clara engaged the gun positions to suppress them, long enough for the team to handle the closing riflemen. Her shots forced the machine gunners low, cutting their rate of fire and accuracy, while M4s from the compound cracked as teammates traded controlled bursts. Grenades thudded and detonated as attackers got close enough to lob them. Defensive fire was intense but disciplined, each shooter choosing targets and managing rounds to stop the assault. The northern element poured out of the ravine, 15 to 20 fighters racing toward the compound where the final 200 meters offered almost no cover, and the moment felt decisive. If they closed, the fight would collapse into close quarters where numbers would matter. So Clara swung full attention to the northern rush and pushed her cadence to a shot every 3 seconds, methodically working down the advancing line with mechanical precision. Target, range, wind, fire, no hesitation, no wasted movement, just trained execution. The first fighter fell at 180 meters, the next at 170, another at 160. Casualties mounted faster than they could close, and survivors went to ground at 140 meters, pinned by accurate fire. The western flanking push hit the compound's soft spot, the sector neither Clara nor the main positions could fully cover, and Luke and Riley fought to hold it with grenades and short rifle bursts. West sectors pressed hard. Luke radioed, breathing heavy, asking for support that Clara from her perch couldn't provide. She had to trust her teammates to hold that flank while she suppressed the other threats. The southern attack stalled about 100 meters out. Fighters hunkered down and still firing but not advancing, while the northern force was fixed at 140 meters and the western group was still pressing but bleeding casualties. "KS 2 minutes, Park reported. They need target coordinates for immediate strikes." Clara assessed quickly. The highest density of enemy forces and support weapons remained at the southern tree line and had to be struck first to prevent reinforcement of the current assault or a renewed push. Priority target: tree line, 600 meters south of compound. Estimate 25 to 30 fighters plus heavy weapons and vehicles. Secondary: ridgeline 400 meters west. Estimate 15 attempting to flank, she transmitted. Park copied the marks, and the distant roar of jet engines grew louder as F-16s came inbound from the east, silhouettes cutting across the darkening sky. "Viper flight, this is Ground Team 1. Troops in contact, danger close, requesting immediate fire mission on marked coordinates," Park transmitted to the aircraft. "Ground Team 1, Viper 2-1 copies troops in contact, danger close, stand by for ordnance." The F-16s banked into their approach, vectoring toward the southern tree line where the main enemy force had gathered. Through her scope, Clara watched the jets release 500-pound GPS-guided bombs that streaked toward the targets with surgical precision. The blasts lit up the darkening valley in white-orange flashes that rolled across the tree line, followed by secondary detonations as vehicles and ammunition stores erupted. The shockwave was visible even from 600 meters away, a boiling wall of smoke and debris clawing at the sky. The southern assault position was gone. Those who survived were fleeing into the night. The jets circled back for a second pass, hammering the western ridgeline. More explosions, more devastation. Enemy positions ripped apart by precision strikes. Fighters who'd been pressing from every direction were now breaking contact, retreating from a fight they could no longer win. Air support had flipped the battle from desperate defense to decisive rout. "All sectors, enemy withdrawing," Voss transmitted. "Maintain observation but conserve ammo. Clara, any threats still active?" She scanned each previous engagement zone. The southern tree line burned. The western ridge smoked. The northern ravine stood empty as the attackers retreated deeper out of sight. "No active threats," she reported. "Some scattered movement east and south. No organized units." "CAS holding on station 30 mics," Park added. "Available for further strikes, providing overwatch until extraction." 25 minutes later, the extraction bird touched down in a clearing 200 meters from the compound, while the F-16s orbited above. The team collapsed their defenses, collected gear and intel, and moved under the watchful cover of the jets. As the helicopter lifted off, Clara looked down. The southern tree line still burned. The compound looked small and fragile, and the valley that had nearly been their grave faded beneath gathering darkness. She had fired 87 rounds, confirmed 73 kills or suppressions, stopped multiple assaults, and kept her team alive through the longest 40 minutes of her career. "Hell of a job up there, Hayes," Voss said over the intercom, voice weary but full of respect. "Without your overwatch, they'd have overrun us in 10 minutes. You just saved 6 lives tonight." "Just doing my job, sir," Clara answered, her tone as tired as it was steady. "Your job was holding off 60-plus fighters for 40 minutes while outnumbered 10-1, Red added. "That's not just doing your job. That's extraordinary. That's exceptional performance under the worst possible conditions," Voss said, his tone quiet but heavy with meaning. The rest of the team agreed. They'd all seen what Clara had done, understood how close they'd come to being overwhelmed, and knew that one sniper had been the thin line between survival and disaster. The helicopter banked toward Fort Meridian, carrying 6 operators who'd survived a fight no one should have walked away from. Behind them, enemy forces were still retreating from a valley where they'd expected an easy victory, but had instead met a Navy SEAL sniper who proved numbers meant nothing when facing someone who never missed. 3 days later, Clara sat in a debriefing room answering questions from intelligence officers determined to dissect every second of the engagement. The enemy force had been larger than initially believed. Intercepts confirmed about 90 fighters committed to the assault, 47 killed directly by Clara's rifle, and another dozen by her teammates' fire. The commander she'd taken out during the southern assault turned out to be a mid-level insurgent leader whose death was already circulating through intelligence channels. "They're reporting that they attacked a coalition force of 20 to 30 personnel," one analyst said, puzzled. "They can't comprehend that one sniper was responsible for most of their losses." "Good," Voss replied. "Let them believe that. It'll make them think twice next time." When the debrief concluded, he pulled Clara aside. "There's talk of a Silver Star recommendation for you. What you did went far beyond expectation." "I just did what I was trained to do, sir." "We're all trained," he answered evenly, "but not all of us can perform like that under fire. You held off a force 10 times our size for 40 minutes, eliminated nearly 50 enemy combatants, and kept us alive. That's not training. That's mastery." Clara didn't know what to say. She'd only done what needed to be done, made the shots that counted, kept her team breathing. Wasn't that the point of being a SEAL? 6 months later, standing in dress uniform, she received the Silver Star for valor in combat. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States, while serving as a sniper with a Navy SEAL element engaged in combat operations." Petty Officer Hayes's exceptional marksmanship, tactical judgment, and unwavering courage under intense enemy fire directly prevented her team's position from being overrun by numerically superior hostile forces. The medal was heavy in her hand. The ceremony was formal, respectful. The senior officers who pinned it on her uniform knew what it represented. Not just one mission, but years of dedication that led to 40 minutes where every trigger pull decided life or death. Yet what Clara remembered most wasn't the award. It was 3 days after the fight, when the team sat together with steaming mugs of coffee and Red raised his cup. "To the best damn sniper in the Navy," he said, "who proved that one person with a rifle and the skill to use it can beat any odds." The team echoed the toast, and in that moment, Clara understood what truly mattered. Medals were nice, recognition appreciated, but the real honor was the respect of those who'd been there. Those who'd watched her hold the line and trusted her when everything went to hell. She had been outnumbered 10-1, facing an army that should have crushed them, given 40 minutes to either perform beyond human limits or watch her brothers die. And she'd chosen to perform, shot by shot, target by target, until 47 enemies learned that numbers don't win battles. Skill does. Training does. Refusal to quit does. Clara Hayes, a Navy SEAL sniper, had faced impossible odds in a nameless valley most would never hear of, and proved what every true marksman knows. When your team's lives depend on you, when chaos reigns, that's when training becomes instinct, when skill becomes art, when one rifle can change the fate of an entire fight. The enemy had been outnumbered. They just didn't realize it until it was too late. Because they hadn't faced 6 SEALs, they'd faced 5, and Clara Hayes with a sniper rifle. And that made all the difference. Thanks for watching. This is Captain Joe's Stories.